Here's a quick disclaimer. The views, statements, and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers. The statements are not intended to be product claims or medical advice. Hi, Diana Frake here. I'm the host of the Gooder Podcast, where I get to talk with the powerhouse women in the food, beverage, and wellness categories about their journeys to success and their insights on the industry. This episode is brought to you by Retail Voodoo. Retail Voodoo is a brand development firm. Our clients include Starbucks, Kind, REI, PepsiCo, Hi-Key, and many other market leaders. We provide strategic brand and design services for the food, wellness, beverage, and fitness industries. So if your goal is to increase market share, drive growth, or simply disrupt the category, give us a call and let's talk. You can find out more at retail-voodoo.com. Well, I'm very interested and excited to introduce to you Olivia Chen, who is co-founder and CMO of TWRL Milk Tea. Olivia was born in the Midwest and raised in Northern California from parents who immigrated from Taiwan. Growing up, she loved the treats her relatives brought from Taiwan and especially the warm memories of making boba tea together at home. After graduating from UC Berkeley, she managed partner relationships at a tech startup where she met Pauline, her co-founder partner. She earned an MBA and MA from Wharton School and the Lauder Institute, and then led marketing teams at Estee Lauder for global brands like Clinique, Donna Karan Cosmetics, and Origins. Well, Olivia, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to dive in and chat.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Where are you calling from, or where are you recording from today?
Well, I'm recording from my home work office, and it's in Northern California. Our TWRL is based in San Francisco.
Okay. Are you guys still in the raininess, or is that subsided?
That has subsided. I think it's going to come in another 3 weeks. We were inundated with, it felt like a tsunami of all sorts.
Really?
Yes, it was raining nonstop, and at one point I thought my roof was going to start leaking. It was just so much rain. It was so much rain.
Oh my goodness! Yes,
and we're not used to it out here.
No,
I was definitely climate change. It's definitely climate change. And
right.
years have never been this cold.
Cold?
Yes, it was super. Now it's not. Now it's super sunny, but when the storm was here, it was the last few weeks before that was really, really cold.
Wow. So I was in Las Vegas for Fancy Foods a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about how they are needing to rebuild the irrigation in the city. It's a massive project that they're working on starting this year because they said they don't typically have rain. And in the last couple of years, they've had they've had enough rain and they didn't have infrastructure to support it, that the hotels, because everything's flat out there, all the lobbies were getting flooded. Every last one of them.
Yes. It was kind of dodged the potholes in California on the highways because the roads have been so dry.
Yes.
Suddenly all this rain and kind of the beating on the roads. And so a lot of people had flat tires, and you were just avoiding potholes that seemed to open up from the earth.
Oh my.
It was crazy.
Oh my God. Fingers crossed for the next bit of rain then. But.
Correct.
So I want to start with, I learned about you guys from last year's Expo East, where I was one of the judges for Pitch Slam, and Pauline, your partner, was the person pitching, and she was just such a great person to connect with. And I'm also a huge fan of milk tea, which we can talk about later. But I had to reach out and say, okay, I got to know more about you guys. So thank you for being open to this. And I'm excited to dive in and learn a little bit about you and what you guys are up to. So let's start with the very first question I like to ask everybody. Can you tell us a little bit about TWRL Milk Tea and why it exists?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. So TWRL is a artisanal plant-based milk tea that's been inspired by our Asian American heritage, innovation, and sustainability.
Mm.
And what makes us super unique is we're powered by plant-based pea milk, and we're
Oh.
also using small family farms for our loose leaf brewed tea.
Oh,
So
you
that's a
are?
little bit different from what's kind of in the market. And I would say
Mhm.
it's also a new category for most retailers.
Mhm.
There is canned milk tea, but it's traditionally from abroad, and it's
Mhm.
higher in calorie count and higher in sugar. So that's
I
a little
see.
bit what makes Twirl unique.
Yeah. And talk for those who don't know what milk tea is. I live on the West Coast and we're inundated with it, but there are other parts of the country where this is still kind of new. Tell us what milk tea is.
Yeah, so tea on a whole is number 2 in the category, so it's actually number 2 after water. And what
Oh.
milk tea is actually essentially a tea latte. So instead of a coffee or a coffee latte, we're basically replacing tea into coffee. And so that's what
Mm.
basically milk tea is, just
Mhm.
adding a milk component or a plant-based milk component
Mhm.
into your tea. And that is what creates a tea latte.
Mhm.
And bubble milk tea, boba milk tea, that phenomenon that's really popular starting in the 80s in Taiwan, which is where bubble tea and bubble tea came from,
Mhm.
has actually basically infiltrated the US and
Right?
around the world. So on the streets of Paris, you often will see somebody holding a bubble tea or a boba tea,
Yeah.
cafe made drink. And
Mhm.
so we basically turned a cafe made drink into a can. And we're the first to do that with plant based milks, and then also really artisanal plant based, artisanal based teas that
Mhm.
are unique to kind of the beverage industry.
Mhm. And you mentioned small family farms. When you say that, are these domestic? Are they overseas? Or is it a mix?
Yeah, so most, if not all, tea farmers are abroad. And so our teas come from China, Japan, and Taiwan.
Okay.
And I would say the teas in Taiwan are pretty well renowned. And
Mm.
so being close to those farmers that use regenerative practices, they also care about biodiversity. They're
Mhm.
practicing farming
Mhm.
techniques that are centuries old, that don't use pesticides. And so
Mhm.
those are kind of small family farms that we're really looking, and that's the first part of when we do our sourcing is,
I
are there
see.
small family farms, do they do
Mhm.
these practices that we
Mhm.
value? And
Mhm.
it's really comes down to the sustainability story that we are really
Gotcha.
adamant about. And Pauline are both moms, we're longtime friends, and so why we care about sustainability is, we are concerned about, the next generation, where our kids, our grandkids, where the future is going. And we just
Mm.
talked earlier about the weather issues,
Yeah.
all of these climate changes. They really do affect, how the food that we produce, the food that we intake, they are going to be affecting us for generations to come.
Mhm.
And so the importance of having planting in season, not using pesticides, not overusing the soil. So those are things that we really, really care about as
Mhm.
we build and scale Toral.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great. I love hearing that. You're right. California is kinda seems to be the lightning rod. Well, maybe it's the second lightning rod because Florida and the Southeast has been getting hammered with those big storms as well. So, seems like the size of these events just keeps getting better or bigger, and there's a greater degree of frequency.
Right.
Uh
I mean, they say the last storm is going to be in the billions for recovery. The
Really?
devastation was quite large.
37 counties? Is that what I heard? That were declared disaster areas?
That sounds about right. I
Yeah.
mean, it was pretty high number.
Yeah.
It was a state of emergency.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, let's go back to the brand a little bit. Tell us a little bit about why you and Pauline decided to do this. What's the genesis story?
Yeah, so Pauline and I met at a tech startup, and we were both in the marketing department working
Okay.
for an amazing marketer named Glenn Kelman, who's the
Mhm.
current CEO of Redfin. So
Okay.
Glenn had, handpicked a marketing team, and we like to say he has a great eye of just picking like-minded people. So because we're all still friends to this day, many of
Oh.
from that original team. and we had always bonded over food. There was actually an app on the software the company that we worked at that was a lunch app where you could order food from local businesses, and we would all eat in the lunchroom together. And so that was the first start of our relationship, was just always bonding over lunch and food. And then as we kind of left that software company, Plumtree, we still connected over the years, catching up over a good meal or at the latest cafe. And about maybe 15 years ago, we talked about creating an Asian inspired snack company. And we were looking at lotus chips and
Yep.
barley popcorn
Yeah.
prior to any of that being existing today. But motherhood, work, and life kind of took over, and that kind of went and disappeared. And so during the pandemic, Pauline, like many, started tinkering around at home, and she started building not a pandemic fridge full of vegetables and, condiments, but it was full of milk tea, bubble milk tea, and different
Really?
varieties. Yes.
Mhm.
And so her pandemic fridge that she bought was filled with different concoctions. And so she was testing recipes and making them at home, as she was doing juggling motherhood and online school and working alongside her husband. And so she started doing focus groups and just testing formulas and variations, and all from the home kitchen and all while at home. So we reconnected during the pandemic, and we started talking about TWRL and what that could be. And so that's how we moved from the home kitchen to a co-packer, and that's where we have TWRL
Gotcha.
today, like in a can.
Yes,
And so it
TWRL in
really,
a can.
so it really just came out of a love for food
Mhm.
and a friendship that was born over the years through that love of food and beverage.
Mhm. Oh, I love the story of friendships that can develop into a a business, and there's something special about brands where, you've got a family member or a close friend, family friend involved. I know that just the stress of building the business is tricky in and of itself. So, how do you and Pauline make sure that you guys are caring for yourselves and the relationship that you have during those really high stress moments? Do you create boundaries for each other, for yourselves, or do you just read each other and know when to move away, or how does that work? How do you guys make sure it works?
I mean, I think it's a great question. I think what's one thing is, not uncommon to other people during the pandemic. We launched our company during the pandemic.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
one, it was actually launched away from each other. So, that
Oh.
was one boundary that was already physically imposed on us. So, a lot of email, a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom
Mhm,
or Google Meet. And so, those were the kind of the tools that allowed us to have a physical separation.
mhm.
We talk and text via Slack, via ClickUp, via Instant, like so many methods. Like we're constantly in contact. And I'm a phone person, and Pauline is actually more introverted, so she
Okay.
prefers kind of all the text. So it's kind of finding that balance a little
Mhm,
bit. I
mhm.
would say the key for a good partnership, regardless of a family member or a friend or a loved one, is actually what you just said, kind of understanding the boundaries of that person. I would say what makes Pauline and I work as a team is we're actually two different personalities. So I'm
Mhm,
an ambivert, so
mhm,
I'm half introverted and half extroverted.
mhm,
She's actually a true introvert that
mhm,
has learned to be more extroverted, like
mhm.
what you saw at Pitch Slam in
Yeah.
Expo East. So she's had to learn to kind of put herself out there. So kind of finding that medium balance
Yeah.
of understanding that we both need to step up to kind of certain situations and personalities.
Yeah.
And I would say we also have one thing I think that most people underestimate when building a brand, especially like ours, where it's a very package forward, very design forward.
Yeah.
Pauline and I essentially have a very similar design aesthetic.
That's super
And
helpful, yeah.
it's super helpful. And what I mean by that is I'm actually more video focused on videos and photos,
Yeah.
and she's definitely like the our boba new boba. That's all Pauline. Like these designs, the
The
graphic
the
side
graphical
is
elements.
all
Mhm.
Pauline.
Mhm.
But when we look at each other's works, we
Mhm.
like, I would say 99% we're like, yes, that's right.
Mhm.
Or we're very open to kind of the feedback to be like, oh, maybe not quite on. But
Yeah.
generally, I would say I'm very trusting of that side. So being able to build a brand like that, where it's so focused on the
Yeah.
packaging and image, it's
Yeah.
very important to be aligned. And I think not a lot of people think like that to begin with. Like, are you aligned on the certain things that are really important? And that is a very important to Pauline and I, as we come from a pretty strong marketing background,
Yeah.
very centric on the consumer, very
Yes.
centric on the image.
Yeah.
So those are things that we look for. And I would say at the end of the day is also having kind of a divide and conquer in terms of responsibilities. So Pauline is more into product development. She loves the creative side
Yeah.
of actually kind of being the taste bud of the product, the new flavor. So our flavor profiles are really unique.
Yeah.
We have a hojicha roasted, we have a
Ooh.
jasmine pu'er, we have a Taiwan style black, and they're
Yes.
very, yeah, they're very unique varietals that are
Mhm.
not commonly found in a tea. So a
Mhm.
tea drink is typically like black, green,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe a jasmine, but ours is a jasmine pu'er. So
Ooh.
that's something that's really kind of in
Mhm.
Pauline's domain, and it um, is well with her more introverted side, where she can kind of nerd out on that science side. I mean, really like nerd, like she's just
I get
always
it.
developing. You know, when I go to Asia, I haul back like bags and bags of tea. Like all my clothes are super fragrant because I'm hauling back
Yes.
tea samples, and she's always having she's always trying new drinks. So like we love like looking at different competitors and like
Yes.
like-minded space, and just kind of always in awe of all the different innovations. And that's part of what I mentioned earlier about the
Yeah.
innovation in our mission statement. So the idea of bringing nitro infusion into our drinks, which is very common now in coffee, but
Mhm.
tea, there was nobody doing it. And we were
Mhm.
the first to bring that.
Mhm. Interesting. You packed so much in there. I have to say that first of all, the alignment thing, we work with lots of brands. I would say 50% or more of the brands that we work with are entrepreneurial founder owners, and the rest are mid cap to multinational. And what I have found with the small startup brands is that sometimes there's that redundancy. This divide and conquer concept that you're talking about really relies on trust and understanding that the other person has got the ball. But I think the beginning of that is something that you said, which is there's an alignment. And oftentimes, I think where the struggle happens for many companies that have multiple founders involved in the decision making is there the alignment isn't set ahead of time, and they're kind of like building the alignment plane as they're flying it. And I think a lot of speed bumps and efficiencies can be had if there's kind of some of those basic alignment issues. Do you trust me with the marketing? How much do you need me to have control? If you're an IT person, or if you're the techie person, you're the nerd out person. Hey, let me take care of this component over here. I got your back. And I'm going to let you do this over here. I think that's super critical for an entrepreneurial brand. However, also super critical in multinationals. You cannot have a team of 40 people making all the decisions. Granted, they do have teams of people making decisions, but they don't bring everybody into every meeting. And I think there's some learnings there, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. I also love that you talk about the introvert extrovert because obviously I'm an extrovert. My business partner, introvert. He's the one that's the strategist. He's in the creative, he's in the data, he's in the research, he's creating all of this magical work behind the scenes on brand positioning. And I mentioned to you earlier, I'm in an MBA program, and we were required to read a book called Quiet, which is basically understanding how introverts work up here. And as an extrovert, it was mind blowing the amount of learning that I now understand about my business partner and how to approach him during certain events, certain conversations, all that sort of thing. Is it is that awareness that you guys have about each other is really fantastic, and it's clearly contributing to your success.
I mean, I think that's really amazing to hear about kind of the similar revelation that you had about introverts and extroverts. So in a past life, I was a publicist
Oh, you
for
were? Okay.
authors. Yes.
Yes.
And so one of the books that I really came to love and actually helped her do her US launch is called Quiet is a Superpower by Jill
Oh,
Chang.
yes. I haven't heard that one. I was this but
Yeah.
it sounds good.
So she is considered the Asia Susan Cain,
Okay.
and so she's quite popular. Her book was translated into English, and it's really about the workplace and
Okay.
how quiet, introverted people can find success and some
Mhm.
tips. And
Mhm.
I actually, having been an ambivert, that's where I actually learned the term.
Yeah.
It was actually like you, similar, very eye opening to understand the struggles, but also the amazing abilities of introverts.
Yes.
And then having that knowledge, it actually helps me work with Pauline a bit better
Yes.
to realize that, I call it out. Like, I prefer a phone call. So
Mhm.
when I meet certain, like certain team members, I'd be like, well, I'm just letting you know, I'm a phone person.
Yes.
I prefer talking versus writing or texting, but I
Mhm.
will kind of abide by the rules, to
Mhm.
kind of give the other person balance. And so kind of working within like a ClickUp or a
Yeah.
Slack channel.
Yeah.
And so, but having a balance, but at the end, I still would like a phone call of some sort, at least once or twice a
Yes.
week, if not once a day, to do a
Yeah.
check-in.
Yes.
And so kind of those are tips and tools that I actually garnered a lot from the book. And I highly recommend people, read it. It's an easy read. I think it helps many people realize that more people are introverted than you realize. A lot of authors are actually most of them, if not all, are
Yeah.
introverted.
I think a lot
And
of
so
creatives are.
a lot of creatives are. And I think now when I meet somebody for the first time, I actually make a mental note. Are they introverted or extroverted? Because that
Mhm.
will adjust how I engage with them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it's actually much more effective.
Yeah. And I'll say, I threw out this term. I said, "Oh, creative people are introverted." I like to remind people that anybody who makes something is creative. So developers and any people who are in the back writing code are developing. They're creating something. People who are in R&D, data scientists, those people are all creating something out of nothing. Mathematicians, many of them are introverted, and it's kind of to the benefit of whatever it is that they're doing for work, because it requires that kind of deep thinking and the ability to just silo in. I'm not so good that with that. I'm not good with that. I am.
Well,
I like.
I think what it is, it's different. I
Yeah.
think you and you, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
half introverted,
Hmm.
extroverted. I think we process things a little bit differently.
Yes.
I process things by thinking out loud,
Yes.
by brainstorming.
Hmm.
And sometimes when I do that with Pauline or some other team members, the best ideas come out that way.
Yeah.
Um, but then it allows someone like Pauline, who's introverted, to take that idea that I've come up
Yes.
with, then to dive deep down, and she
Yes.
can go deep.
Yes.
And so I would say that type of partnership is something
Hmm.
that is worth looking into when
Yes.
founders are looking for
Yes.
partners, and who do you surround yourself with,
Yes.
and realizing like what type of personality will work well.
Yes.
I would say I'm more direct. So,
Hmm.
that person, like Pauline is like really, really nice, right? She's very much more easygoing, and I'm
Hmm.
much more direct. I'm much more out there. And so finding that balance of how do
Hmm.
you figure out that team dynamic, I think
Yeah.
is very, very important.
Yes.
And most founders, I think, like you said, are just kind of sludging through, just like trying to put out fires.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned, I read somewhere that, what is a founder's life like? And it really is just about managing problems that arise
Uh,
every day.
Truth.
And
Yes.
there was a period of time where I thought, oh, this is really difficult, right? Like being, we launched Twirl, we got into distribution, we won
Yeah.
some, those, but then every day there's like a new challenge. And once I kind of thought to myself, like, okay, what problem am I going to solve today? Like,
Right.
what problem am I going to be able to address
Yes.
and kind of mitigate? It helped, to be honest. And you talked earlier about what boundaries do we set. I have been trying to reincorporate exercise back into my life. So I'm trying like a 30-day yoga challenge. I used to do
Good
yoga
for
every day.
you.
Yeah. So I'm on day 3.
Okay.
Day 3.
One
But I
day
used to
one
do
day
it
at a
every day.
time, one day at a
I used to
time.
do it every day and trying to do, a couple times of walks where I
Yes.
listen to podcasts. I'm a huge podcaster
Good.
listener. So that's why when you reached out, I was like, yeah, I love podcasts. I actually think podcasts are a great way to refuel the mind and have creative ideas.
And there's so many people, there's so many different ways to deliver messages and so many ways to slice and dice human behavior that the number of podcasts out there are just endless. It's kind of like the new book almost, for lack of a better description, but yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah, right. Like figuring out how you work with a business partner is such a big deal. And I would say the difference between David and myself is I work best when I can think in chaos because the chaos actually fuels my thinking. Oh, I hadn't think I'm going to take a little bit about that and a little bit of this and throw it into a blender and here's a couple of ideas. He likes to have things kind of organized, know where like put everything in, I always say he's very Swiss in his thinking and his design. Everything's got a place and every place has a thing, and it's too sterile for me, and it's magical that I can do think about the same thing over here that he can think of, and we often come to the same conclusions or near the same conclusions. So it's very interesting how that all works, and having an awareness going into a business relationship about be maybe don't be overly concerned that your partner thinks differently than you because that could actually be the magic bullet.
I'm in agreement. I mean, I think a lot of times, especially when you're building your brand, having those creative ideas, out of the box thinking,
Mhm.
how do you get your brand noticed? And
Mhm.
throughout my career, one theme that came up through every job I had and the
Yeah.
feedback from my managers were, oh, you're super creative. You
Mhm.
don't think like other people and you don't
Mhm.
present ideas or execute ideas that are the same as everyone else. And I think that's been a joy to bring that side to
Yes.
TWRL,
Yeah.
in terms of partnerships, in terms of ideas of how we come to market with
Mhm.
products and launches. And so I do recommend a lot of people kind of leaning into kind of those things
Yeah.
that over the years people have told you that you're good
Mhm.
at.
Yes.
There is a theme.
Mhm.
And when you're younger, I think you don't always think about them
Mhm.
necessarily
Right.
as like traits. And I would say it was only in the last few years I started to realize, oh, I'm creative. But if I had asked my younger self, I probably wouldn't have deemed myself creative
Hmm.
because to me, a creative person was a true artist. Someone who knew how
Right.
to draw, or was an architect that could build a
Yep.
building. And so I didn't necessarily equate
Yes.
that with your traditional arts or someone
Right.
who's dramatic on a play. But
Yes.
but now looking back on every project, every manager, every person I've touched has always said, you're really creative.
Hmm.
And so that now I kind of lean really into that and I like say like, yeah, you know what? I am actually a very creative person. And that is something that's an asset to Twirl.
That's cool. Well, let's go back to milk tea here. I want to ask you, milk tea, it feels like it exploded into the American marketplace a couple 3 years ago. Mostly the bubble tea, not just I think through the bubble tea kind of venue. And let's not deny it. Twirl is one of the darling brands. People are really paying attention to what you guys are doing, not only because the marketing, but because the product is so good. In your opinion, what's inspiring the growth of this category now? What's connecting with American consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great question. So we're really lucky. We're in a couple of categories of growth.
Mhm.
One is, as mentioned, tea is number
Yeah.
two. It's a really growing category. More and more coffee drinkers are turning to tea. And the
Yeah.
reason is tea actually has L-theanine, which
Yeah.
is a mood calming, amino acid that's
Mhm.
naturally found in tea. So it's not something you need to add in. And what that is a mood relaxant. So it
Mhm.
gives you the energy, kind of a clean focus, but it doesn't give you the jitters
Yeah.
that you typically have with coffee.
Mhm.
I would say another category of growth would be the movement towards less sugar, lower calories.
Mhm.
So all our drinks are under 50 and under 7 grams of sugar. So under 50 calories and 7 grams of sugar, which is
Mhm.
organic agave. So it's like real sugar. So it's not using erythritol or sugar alcohols,
Mhm.
which when we did the testing, which where Pauline nerded out, I mean, she must have tested like hundreds and hundreds of recipes. you, you, it's kind of,
Mhm.
we're doing testing now for new flavors, and it is just like
Mhm. Mhm.
mind-boggling how many versions. She's coming to my house in about an hour, and I know she's going to be bringing like trays of like cups of tea and
Oh, that would
concoction.
be so fun.
It is super,
Mhm.
super fun. We probably should do a video for that. And so that's a big growth of leaning into that idea of healthier, better for you. And that really stemmed from our own needs. As we got older, we found we couldn't drink the cafe made drinks because they were really high in sugar. They're typically between 200,
Oh.
no, calories are 250 to 300 calories
Mhm.
and 30 grams of sugar. And
Mhm.
so I usually go to a cafe and I'll be like, can you give me 25% sugar?
Right, I do the same.
Yeah, you do this. A lot of people do, but it's very inconsistent because you don't know if the barista is like, are they able to guess like what level of
Right.
25%, or
Yeah.
like, and like the tea affects it, like the flavor, and so it's not consistent.
Yeah.
And it's also like the time. We don't actually always
Yeah.
have the time to go to a cafe, so
Yeah.
being the ability to order online or just pick it up from your grocery store was something essential. So those are the two categories. And I would say the big trend of convenience,
Mhm.
the rise in grab and go,
Yeah.
ready to eat lunches. And so coupling that with the ready to drink beverages, I would say those are things that are big. Most importantly, I would say that there is a trend for authenticity in brands,
Mhm.
looking at who is behind the brand.
Yeah.
I would say in the past, brands have been able to be launched just as a brand, but not
Mhm.
understanding who is behind it.
Yeah.
Are you authentically able to bring that story, that flavor profile in an authentic way
Mhm.
to the consumers?
Mhm.
There are a few brands that are bringing Asian inspired beverages and snacks, but they're actually not Asian founders. They have nothing
Mhm.
related to the Asian
Yeah.
culture. They found those flavor profiles and are able to bring that to the market. But I
Mhm.
would say now, given kind of what's happening in the US, from all the different hate crimes as well as
Yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
of the landscape and the importance of this authenticity, brands like Twirl, where Pauline and I are in some ways now we've had to become more of the face of the brand.
Yeah.
The introverted side of Twirl
Oh,
of Pauline
Pauline.
would, yeah, would Pauline would be prefer to just have everything behind like
Right.
this.
Yeah.
And we've had conversations. I said, well, I think we need to lean in, because people are interested and they're excited to know that there's two women that
Yes.
look like them,
Yes.
sound like, that are Asian
Yeah.
American, and they're creating a brand that's reflective of a culture that they could relate to. And so I would say we're not building an Asian brand that's
Yeah.
only from Asia.
Yeah.
We're not building only an American brand. We're building
Yeah.
an Asian American brand
Yeah.
that's reflective
Yeah.
of, we both grew up here. I was born and raised in the
Yeah.
US. And this is a molding, a melting
Yeah.
pot of things that I grew up with.
Well, I'm going to add something else that you may not be considering, but my parents were immigrants, and I also have a connection with other people, particularly women who are children of immigrant families, because we're kind of not of this culture, we're not of that culture, we're a little bit of both. I remember talking with Asha. Do you know Asha Abuela over at the Mason Dixie?
Oh, I've heard of the brand.
Yeah,
I think I follow her.
she's a wonderful lady, and we talked about the fact that it's kind of like you don't fit in anywhere and you fit in everywhere at the same time, but there's a work ethic that is instilled by our parents because immigrant families tend to have their parents come over with a certain expectation of performance of their children, and so we all really work very hard. So I would say you guys are also an inspiration on the face of, other people whose parents have come from somewhere else and are here and doing big and great things. So there's another group there for you as
Yeah,
well.
I think that's really, beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that,
Yeah.
story about your background and your parents. And Pauline and I are like you, daughters of immigrants.
Mhm.
And the biggest champion of twirl is actually our parents. Like I actually tear
Oh.
up thinking about how proud they are of Pauline and I. Like literally tearing up because
Oh.
we'll send articles or send podcasts that we've been featured on, and our parents are like, "Oh my gosh, so amazing!" And for them to see that their daughters are creating a brand in a new country that they,
Yes.
came with just suitcases and
Right.
really, really humble beginnings, humble
Yes.
beginnings, starting from nothing and not knowing anybody.
Right.
And so I would say when we start twirl, it sometimes feels a little bit like that humble beginning,
It does.
starting
Yes.
from starting from just our own connections and grit, to
Gumption.
really just yeah, like a lot of, I would say we have a lot of hustle,
Yeah.
and that's where the creativity needs to come in. To
Yes.
how do you stand out? I think you
Yeah.
mentioned a little bit about the challenges of twirl. It is a very competitive market in beverage, and you ask why is twirl gaining that traction? I would say we are really focus on great tasting milk tea. It just happens to be plant based. It
Yeah.
wasn't, the reason. That wasn't
Yeah.
it. Pauline is vegetarian, but
I see.
there are people in Taiwan who are from the bubble milk tea industry, the tea industry, and they were shocked that it was plant based. So a
Really?
lot of times we don't always lead with the plant based.
Right.
We lead with just a great tasting milk tea.
Yes. With amazing founders, like,
Oh, thank you
in a
so much.
passion.
I
Yes.
mean, we're very grateful. We're very, very grateful for, the recognition by people like you and just the support.
Yeah.
As a small brand that speaks volumes,
Mhm.
being able to open up your network,
Mhm.
your resources,
Mhm.
your voice to help amplify what
Yes.
we're trying to do. It's not easy competing against brands and companies that have multi-million dollar campaigns where it's, Pauline and I we're still working from our homes,
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of things that you'd be surprised that we're still doing. But we have a lot of dreams about the
Yeah.
idea that Twirl will be a brand that will be very commonly found in your pantry and your
Mhm.
fridge.
Mhm.
And we hope that, someone will be able to kind of recognize that.
I'm sure that that is in your future. Well, I wonder, we've told so much of your story, and I wonder what sort of advice you might give to other people that are wanting to follow in your footsteps and starting a new brand.
Yeah, I would say have differentiation with the brand that you're wanting to build and the product that you want to bring to market.
Mhm.
I mentored some Wharton students. I
You
had my
did.
recently, and I kind of, they were doing a case competition, and I said, you really need to think about what would make you special. A buyer is looking at a lot of different products,
Mhm.
in the beverage and the food space, and they have a lot of choice. So
Mhm.
why would they want to choose you? And what would make your product distinct? And I
Mhm.
shared with him, what makes Twirl distinct is, Pauline and I grew up with this beverage.
Mhm.
We grew up with this beverage that exploded in popularity in the
Mhm.
80s. And it's,
Mhm.
as you said, has kind of moved that explosion over to the US, to the world, actually, where
Yeah.
most people are walking around with a boba milk tea. If you went after school, where would you go hang out? You would probably
Right.
hang out at a boba cafe. And so that phenomenon, how do you translate that into a product that is popular in a grocery store? So
Yeah.
those are probably the uniquenesses
Yeah.
that are a trend, but a trend that is here to stay.
Mhm.
So I often talk about kind of thinking hard and deep about like who and what you are.
Mhm.
And that part is critical to a brand success.
Awesome. Well, what's next for Twirl? You mentioned you gave a little hint about new
I
product.
did.
Yes, girl.
So we
Okay,
have
what's
a
new?
yeah. So we have a pre-order of a what we're calling a jelly boba. It's super amazing. It's a ready to eat. You just cut open the packets
Oh.
and they're made of cognac. So
Oh.
some people call it crystal jelly. And so it's just like little packets. It
Oh,
has a
interesting.
lychee flavor.
Yes, my
And
favorite even. All
yes,
right.
yes. And it's very low calorie, low sugar. You just cut it open, strain it, and then you just put it into your drink and it pairs really, really nicely. And so
Love it.
something who's looking for something a little bit chewy, to pair with like your milk tea, ideally a twirl, that we highly recommend that. And so that's on pre-order from
Mhm.
our website, and then we'll officially working on launching to stores starting in February, March. And then we have a brown sugar boba, and this is instant, so it requires heating in
Gotcha.
the
Oh,
microwave
okay.
or the
Mhm.
stove. Yeah, so it looks similar but slightly different. So you
Okay.
have to cut it
Yep.
open and
Yep.
then you just put it in a jar. Either you microwave it or you put on the stove oven under 30 seconds, and that's ready to go into a drink. And
Mhm.
I would love to share a fun term that's really common in
Okay.
Taiwan,
Yes.
and it's called QQ. You
Cute.
spell it with the Q and Q.
Okay.
And QQ, it just means chewiness
Okay.
in Taiwanese. And it's similar to how you would say, is a pasta ready? Is it al dente?
Oh,
So QQ is the new al dente, I would say.
I love
Um,
it.
yes, and so we have the perfect QQ
Perfect
that you have
QQ.
in the bobas and in the jelly bobas.
I
And
love it.
so we are super excited to kind of bring this new step into where Twirl is going, is being able to pair
Yeah.
bobas plus our milk teas. And some people might ask, like, oh, why don't you have bobas in your milk teas?
Yeah.
So we did a lot of testing,
Yeah.
focus groups when we first launched, and we decided to lean into the flavor profiles of what Twirl has,
Mhm.
but also
Mhm.
boba essentially is a tapioca. Like
Yeah.
jelly is a non-tapioca alternative,
Mhm.
but tapioca is a starch that absorbs water. So to put that into a can that has like a year shelf life or a year and a half, the taste won't last, and it affects kind of the outcome of what you would have with
Yeah.
that QQ that I have mentioned before.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we decided, and a lot of people are actually concerned about calories.
Yeah.
So how do you keep low calorie without having to go down a sugar alcohol
Mhm.
route, which affects taste?
Yeah.
So we wanted to actually separate them out. So we worked on building that twirl audience, and then we tested long and hard about finding the perfect QQ, the perfect sweet but not too sweet bobas to pair with twirl. So that's kind of where we're doing it. And then in May, we will be launching a new flavor that we're really, really excited about. It's we just can't wait to kind of share more with others.
Oh, okay. Not ready for prime time though. We have to wait.
Yes, it's not
Okay.
complete. It's we'll be doing an announcement
Okay.
probably in March at
Okay.
Expo
At
West.
Expo West.
Yeah, so if
Okay.
people can come to Expo West to our booth, we'll be having samples there. Actually,
Okay. I will be there.
you will be there.
I will
Yes,
be
yes, yes.
there. Olivia, I'm really enjoying our time together. I love hanging out with extroverts, and I'm a huge tea fan. I actually drink probably 6 cups of green tea every day at minimum, loose leaf, and RTD is right on the back end of that on those days when I'm moving around. So super excited to see what you're doing in this space. I always have 1 or 2 questions I like to ask everybody that's kinda not off topic, but sort of off topic. This show is really about elevating women leadership in CPG, and so one of the questions I like to ask is, are there any other women leaders out there or rising stars in our industry or not that you would like to elevate or just simply admire for the work they're doing right now?
Yeah, I would love to highlight Lauren from Love and Chew. I
Okay.
think she's a wonderful um, person who's a fellow API founder based in San Francisco. And we've recently connected and had, some phenomenal conversations about what it's like to start a food and beverage brand. She's a few years ahead of us. So she's been really generous with her knowledge. And so I would love to kind of give a shout out to
Yay.
Lauren and tell her that we're really appreciative of founders like her who are willing to share and uplift.
Great. And what's her brand again? So everybody can
Love plus chew.
Love plus chew. Okay, great. Well, we've been talking with Olivia Chen, co-founder and CMO of TWRL Milk Tea. Olivia, where can people learn more about you and about TWRL?
Yeah, so we would love for people to connect on social media, on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram. Our handle is at TWRL Milk, MILK, and then T and TEA. So TWRL Milk Tea.
Oh my goodness.
And we have our website. It's www.twirlmilktea.com. And so look forward to connecting.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I am so happy to have met you, and I look forward to watching what you and Pauline are up to, and I'll be sure to say hello at Expo. Then I want to thank our listeners for your time today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll catch you next time on the Gooder Podcast.
Produced by Heartcast Media.